Rogers was the hospital board vice chair and chair during one of the most challenging times in the recent history of the hospital, from 2020 to 2023. His steady hand and thoughtful guidance kept our hospital strong and healthy for the Northfield community.
He has consistently supported all hospital staff, showing a deep understanding of how the success of any organization depends on the commitment of all employees to its mission. He's been an exceptional mentor, a great listener, and patient teacher. It's hard to imagine a more experienced and knowledgeable board member. Fred has other volunteer commitments, including some in other parts of the world. He's actively involved with the Northfield Public Library. In the past, he has also served on the Northfield Economic Development Authority. Fred views Northfield holistically as a community in which all the parts must work together to make life better for everyone.
Fred is especially deserving of recognition for his exceptional hospital service, but more importantly for his commitment to our community and its people. Thank you, Fred, and congratulations on being the 2023 recipient of the Board or Commission Member of Excellence Award.
Thank you. I have to say I was very surprised to learn that I had even been nominated, let alone that I won this award. I am very grateful and inspired by the work of so many volunteer members of city commissions and boards in Northfield who serve our community. I have been privileged to serve on the Northfield Enterprise Corporation Board, the Economic Development Authority, and now the Northfield Hospital Board. And as a Rotarian, I relished this opportunity to serve my community, to use my professional experience and insights in ways that maybe help the community. And I'm grateful and appreciative for the work that I do with others who are similarly motivated.
My first impression of Fred was, by title, I knew he was smart since he was the chief financial officer at Carleton. I didn't know much about him at that time. He was kind, he was warm, he was welcoming. I knew he had strong opinions and lots of ideas. So it's been really fun to get to know him more deeply over time and understand the level of commitment he brings to the community, and especially to Carleton, and the long-term love he has for this area and for all of the boards on which he serves.
I got to know Fred as I had been at Carleton a little bit longer and started to get involved in some of the governance and administrative things on campus. And Fred came probably about the middle of my time at Carleton, and I was struck by how professional he was. He had incredible knowledge and experience, and I thought, this is great that we can attract someone with this skill set to Carleton. And then, of course, I realized that he had some deep connections to Northfield and to Carleton, since he's a Carleton graduate, came here in his 70s and spent his undergraduate years here before he went off and worked in some other parts of the world. But a little bit like my affection for Northfield, I think Fred, in his undergraduate days, came to love Northfield and was drawn back to Carleton in part because of the quality of life in Northfield overall. So it was clear he had, the skills that Carleton needed. And economists, which is what I am, and a kind of professional finance person, which is what Fred is, we sort of view the world the same way. Maybe a little bit nerdy, maybe not the same way that a lot of people view the world, but I think we were kind of simpatico in our worldview and our view about the things that were important for Carleton. And then ironically, that's also been kind of helpful to serve with him on the board, because I think we have some similar, there's some difference to be sure, we're not identical, but we view the kinds of things that are important for the hospital in pretty similar ways, I think.
I came to Carleton never having visited the campus before. I just came with my trunk as a freshman. So it was kind of like awe, like, wow, that's what it's like. Yeah. And it was, I've often said that the September weather in Northfield is why so many people stay. Because when you come here as a freshman and you see this amazingly blue sky and winds, and it just feels glorious, you somehow can imagine that it'll always be like that, or at least it'll go back to that. And then winter seems like a temporary aberration from what you experienced at the beginning. At least that's my optimistic perspective. The biggest issues going on when I was a student were the Vietnam War and the civil rights struggles. And, I was on the Carletonian staff, and so I was involved in trying to write about that and take pictures of that. I was a photographer. And So yeah, I was involved in some of those issues that were happening both in town and in the college, but not so much in local government per se. I think I was, like a lot of students, probably kind of oblivious to what was actually happening behind the scenes and all of that. I actually thought I was going to be a city manager. I went to get a master's degree in urban and public affairs, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just work for city governments somewhere. And I did a lot of internship work for 2 cities, Washington, D.C. and Pittsburgh. And then I got sort of serendipitously involved in university budgeting and finance, and I ended up spending my whole career doing that instead. But, in some ways, running a campus is kind of like running a small city. And some of the other campuses I worked at before coming to Carleton were much larger than Carleton, and so they were more city-like. But I have a continuing interest in public policy as a result of that, and how people work together, what we can do strategically to be effective and helping really advance our collective interests. So in the case of Northfield, I'd been on boards before I came back here, and when somebody came and asked me about something, I was ready to say yes. And then, as we know, one thing leads to another. So what brought me to Northfield was the opportunity to work at Carleton, where I had graduated as a student over 50 years ago now. And so I was sort of, in a sense, coming back to my place where I had had so much great experiences as a student, and now the opportunity to work professionally at the college. I was asked to serve on the Northfield Enterprise Corporation board, which was a relatively new organization at the time. And then, having done that for a number of years, I got to meet some of the city council members and other people actively involved in entrepreneurship and kind of promoting economic development. And then I was appointed to the Economic Development Authority Board, which was even more directly involved in those kinds of activities. And I spent 6 years there, 1 year as president. And I was very pleased with that work. Marriott Hotel and Imminent Brewing were 2 of the larger investments that happened during my tenure on the authority. And so I think those and many small businesses and even improvements to existing businesses that we were able to support, I think all lead to the vibrancy and continued strength of Northfield. Well, if I'd known I was going to be chair during COVID, I might have had a different opinion about that. But the way you become chair is you're vice chair first. And so I was vice chair before COVID started, and then it was my turn to be chair. And then I was like, wow, this is different. But, leading the board through COVID was quite an experience. We were all sort of figuring out what to do and what needed to be done. The hospital really stepped up. I was very pleased with how they stepped up and helped provide vaccinations and testing and information to the whole community beyond just their staff and patients in ways that really, I think, helped our community get through that time. So, it was something we were all trying to figure out as we went along, and people were being creative and committed to the ultimate goal of keeping the community safe and healthy. And so it was a good thing in the end, but I wouldn't have, said, oh, I'd like to be chair during a pandemic. But
I think there's a lot of ways in which his approach to leadership and to volunteer service has built the character of the hospital board in general, even if he hasn't directly recruited everyone on the board, which obviously he hasn't. I think that the way that he leads and leads by his own character, leads by example, has helped the board become a strong and important model for helping the hospital move forward going into the future. And I think, Steve, the CEO of the hospital, would absolutely agree with that. That's can often be a little bit tricky because, the CEO, you have to kind of know when you're on the board, where's that line between governance and management? And you have to stop and say, okay, this is a governance issue. Management things have to be done by the administration and the president of the hospital. And I could imagine someone with Fred's background thinking, I spent a lot of time doing management things in a similar organization. In this case would be higher ed. And I think maybe I should be telling the CEO exactly how to run things. And I've never, ever sensed that for a second. Fred never tells you how to run things. He gives you his opinion, well-reasoned and thoughtful, but he understands that line between governance and management in a way that's really beneficial to the hospital.
Working with Fred as the chair was really inspiring. Fred has an amazing brain. He can go from high-level strategy right down into the detail. And as a former CFO at Carleton, he's a numbers guy. He understands that numbers are only good as the story they tell. And he made sure to ask the kinds of questions that would help us all as board members to understand the story that we needed to understand to make the challenging decisions we had to make. We've been having to make these last few years.
He's got the kind of skill set that when he retired, he could very well have said, okay, I'm going to try to do a little bit of consulting on the side. I'm going to still do something that keeps my, toe in the pool of kind of higher education and maybe earn a little bit of income. But it was clear that Fred said, what I'm going to do is take the skill set and give it back to my community. Fred, he was actually born in New Mexico, but he grew up in Pennsylvania for most of his childhood. And then he went and lived in Beirut for a couple years of high school. His family moved to that part of the world, and so he actually had a very unique experience in high school. And then he came to Carleton and got to know Northfield. And what's been interesting is I've talked to Fred about his relationship with Northfield. The vast majority of oldies and Carls that come and go to school here for 4 years typically go off and make their professional lives elsewhere. We have an economic base here that's not as big as the Twin Cities or any kind of metro area. So that's where a lot of these really highly skilled students go off to. Some of them do come back, often in retirement, they might think about that. But Fred came back professionally. And then when he finished that role at Carleton, he and his wife, had some conversations about where they were going to live. And, as Fred described it to me, he came to realize that Northfield was home for him now. That his ties to Pennsylvania had diminished over time, probably as people had passed away and his siblings had moved to other parts of the country. And he came to realize that the place that was home for him was Northfield. And so that commitment that he has to the place resonated with me. Northfield feels like home to me as well. And the fact that he could do many other things with his skill set, and he's got ties to other parts of the world. He still has ties in the Middle East and has been supportive of some volunteer activities over there as well. But it's clear to me that Northfield was his home, and that's the place where his commitment in terms of volunteer activities was going to be the strongest. And so I thought that really deserves some recognition by the city and by others who don't know Fred and Fred's story.
One of the things I've been most impressed about working with Fred is that he was able to both take a strong leadership role as chair, and then he was able to step back and be the mentor and the person alongside for me as I stepped into the board chair role. And most people can't do that. Many leaders really struggle with giving up and letting go of some power. And Fred was willingly stepping into the mentor role. And I just believe we need more elders in this society. And I don't mean that as someone old. I mean that as someone who has experience and knowledge and is looking to help develop the people coming behind them so that we each can step into new roles and bring our full giftedness to the table. So Fred does that masterfully. He's committed to doing that in a way that I haven't seen many leaders do. So I really am grateful for that. Part of what I think gets missed right now is that we're all responsible for creating a community that's vibrant and alive and healthy. Part of what I've appreciated about working with Fred is that he's willing to challenge. He's willing to challenge my thinking. He's really willing to challenge the CEOs and the leadership team's thinking, all in service to making it better. And so I feel like we've got this amazing community that is open to engagement and invites community engagement. And it's so easy to sit back and throw stones or sit back and judge what everybody is doing rather than rolling up your sleeves and getting in there and being part of the solutions. We're responsible for creating the world we've got. And if we're sitting back watching, we're not actually making anything happen.
Fred, you were so kind and generous to encourage me to get involved in the board service, and I've been deeply thankful for that opportunity. I would also say that your skill set and the kinds of things you bring to the hospital are just incredible. You could use them in lots of places, and you choose to give them to Northfield and to the hospital. And I think the other thing that's really important to know, you served as board chair, and you could either have stepped down and said, okay, my time is done, or you could have, as a board member, kind of let the rest of us know that you were the board chair, and so you knew as much or more than most of us did. And I have never felt that for a single second. You've been an incredible mentor for those of us that are new to the board, and you have been a great listener, a great teacher, And you've been happy to share your views. You're no shrinking violet, but you don't try to tell people how to do things. You say, this is my opinion, this is why I think we should go in this direction, but I want to hear what the rest of you have to say and what the rest of you think. And that's made for a great experience for individuals on the board, and I think it's also made for better governance for the hospital overall.
I would just say it's a great way to meet a lot of good people and to spend time with them.